The 20th century can be best defined by one word: war. In the span of 100 years, our nation witnessed 5 major wars: World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the Cold War. This time period was defined in epic highs like the Roaring Twenties and immense lows like the Great Depression. During this time, we were also met with a new kind of expression through the arts. Prior to this century, art was created and valued, but never in a way as much as it was in the 20th century. Artists, musicians, and performers became pop culture icons whose work are still adored today. This time also experienced major worldview changes with every generation. We begin in the 1910s, where women had few rights and people were more demure. By the end of the 20s, we have women protesting for more rights, along with colored people protesting as well. While women managed to gain the right to vote, colored people must continue to protest. By the time the 60s roll around, it feels as though we're in a completely different world. People begin to become more liberated and open about themselves. Women's skirts get shorter, and the number one thing that sells in the country is sex. Colored people are finally given more rights as segregation finally comes to an end. Through the 70s, the number one thing on everyone's mind is drugs. Recreational use of drugs is off the charts, and so is sex. This theme is carried through into the 80s and 90s. In this period, we've seen a complete 180 in just 100 years. The beginning of this century is marked by virtue, and society is run through God's principles and expectations of us. By the end of the century, His principles seem to be completely gone. However, this century has also seen many good things happen. Women being able to vote, the end of segregation, and the end of a century marked by wars. Peace seems more possible after all the turmoil. The reason I chose this century is because it produced all my favorite art pieces. From the works of Pablo Picasso to Andy Warhol, the contemporary art movement that began with this century has inspired me as an artist for many years. They not only redefined what could be considered art, but also how it could be made. Photography and filmography became useful for more than just practical purposes, but to create art too. The art piece that I think best describes this century is Campbell's Soup Cans by Andy Warhol. This piece defines the era where art didn't mean anything. With the world so focused on war, it seemed pointless to actually care about art. This time period is defined by artists throwing out the rulebook on art and doing whatever they wanted and calling it art. Andy Warhol literally just painted a multitude of soup cans, and the art world went crazy over it, which further proves the point: anything can be art. This is what inspires so many artists today and what has inspired me as well.